Hello there and welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. Before we even start this repatriation and reintegration process that we've already failed, or are we doomed to fail?
You've got to invest in the institutions that you've established to carry out those sorts of core functions.
We now get into the regional updates to give you an understanding of what's happening across our neighboring islands.
We have available a number of films that are worth showing.
So it was day one when the French Revolution started to develop the concept of universal human rights.
What happened this time is unprecedented. It's one of the largest terrorist attacks in history.
Let's welcome Carl to the program. Carl is over there next to Insta. Hello, Carl.
Silky anteater or pygmy anteater, and we have two of the three species of anteaters right here.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm not to do with that.
I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement. If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of the
not
game.
no.
Let's go to the last part.
Time is a hell of a thing. Time is a concept by which we identify, well, the passage of time. And to some extent, how we measure it is essentially based up to us. We base it on the rotations of our planet. We've figured out how to divide it into more smaller chunks that are easier to digest, to comprehend, to understand, to plan around. You know, we can't plan our days around, well, you know, this 100th of a day, or I'll come and meet you by hour 22. But I find myself sometimes when the various interests start to collide, as my favorite sports season is coming back, I will all of a sudden have a shortage of time. Now, that shortage does not mean that I have an excuse to say maybe I should take things easier on talking points, or maybe I could just go on Face of Sports and kind of phone it in. I have to figure out the extra demands on my time. Physically, it's not that difficult. Mentally, trying to absorb all the information, it could take time. Take time to let it process so that proper analysis comes out. But that's a me problem. That's not a viewer problem. That's not a studio problem. That's not an Andre problem or Keaton problem or Joash or Mile problem. That's a me problem. One of the things that we as a country lack is time. Because a lot of our natural resource reserves are starting to run out. And we may find new pockets, we may find new sources, but that's not guaranteed. And the various commercial entities in the energy sector that do that sort of exploration work, they don't necessarily always seem to be the most enthused at investing more money to try to maybe find more natural gas and oil. So we have limited time before the balance point of our entire economy falls off. The problem is what's reducing the sense of urgency to do something about that. What is causing governments, well, arguably this government, because I guess you could say the reality has only recently, and by recently I mean within the last 10 years, so it's not that recent, but strategically speaking, on a macro scale, recently speaking, reality is now slapping this administration in the face. We don't necessarily have a lot of time to try to pivot. The longer it takes, the harder the pivot will be because we'll have less room to maneuver, less resources to play with in order to put some investment in for future opportunities in other areas. Unfortunately, a lack of time, what's holding us back is a lack of money. We've already reached the point where we have hard decisions to make because not only did we start to reduce our resources, our earnings, but when we were making the extra, I think what people might not necessarily grasp yet is the double whammy that hit us. Because as we're having to deal with reduced revenue, we also have to deal with recently increased expectations of expenditure. Because within the last decade, we got accustomed to GATE, among other things, and our welfare system, for lack of a better way to put it. It's an oversimplification, but for the sake of time, among other things, grew, and we spend more. And now we have this huge system of which people have planned for and rely on, so it can't necessarily all be blamed on them for doing so. In some cases, maybe it can because they're exploiting the system. We can't necessarily turn that back. We can't scale that back down without going through growing pains. But when expenditure, we get accustomed to increasing expenditure, because that's what we did. We did not use our windfalls throughout the last few decades to increase capital investment that then set us up for the long term. We did essentially short-term expenditure. GATE was supposed to be long-term, but we implemented it so poorly, it essentially was a recurring expense that didn't really give us any long-term benefit. Tell me I'm wrong on that, because our private sector, our job market, yes, it's more competitive, yes, people are more educated, but to some extent, where has our economy grown significantly enough because of this education that we could point it and say, yes, all that money to GATE made sense in the long run. Everybody now is profiting. Because pensioners, all of that is, to some extent, your money as well, going into these programs. We invest in the young ones so that the young ones could take things forward. But it's not happening. It's not happening how it should, given the specific type of expenditure in the specific investments that were made. Yeah, we invested in them. Yes, they're better off. Yes, we're glad for them. But as a society, we didn't necessarily do it properly. And in fact, in some cases, the young people are also feeling the burdens of that poor implementation. But now we have to deal with the fact that we're accustomed to spending this and we're earning this. Before, we were somewhere in a balance. But the scales shifted in both sides, each moving in opposite directions because each had its own forces acting upon it. And therein lies the next point. I'm now looking at having less time per week. I have to figure it out. maybe I'll have to be a little bit more uncomfortable, but that's okay, because that's a me problem. A lack of time, at some point, yes, there will be a finite wall that you just cannot cross. But there will be instances where, look, at the very least, you still have to do the best you can with what you got, because work needs to be done. Now, in the private sector, for a personal job, at some point, yes, they're going to have limitations. But when it comes to government, when it comes to doing the job for the people, that the people have needs that need to be met. To what extent could you say, well, you know, we have to be reasonable and understand that some of you will have to have your needs not met. It's not necessarily about being able to do everything magically with less, but to what extent are the needs prioritized properly? To what extent are we just rehashing the same old, and hoping that somehow we could hold on to what we have, but at the end of the day we need to realize, no, that's not going to work. That's not going to work at all, because we just can't keep up doing it like the way we did it. Lack of money is no obstacle. Lack of an idea is an obstacle. And now I do have to wonder if, because when we look at how the country is being run, for the most part, point to me somebody with a new innovative idea to deal with our economic situation. A truly innovative idea. Not a, well, we'll get more natural gas. We'll make more gas deals with Venezuela. That's the low-hanging fruit. That's the obvious. They're our neighbor. You cannot get more obvious than energy deals with shared resources with our neighbor. To say that that has any degree of innovation, no matter how much foreign diplomatic negotiations is required and dealing with Maduro, and I understand the situation is delicate, it's not innovative. More importantly, cost-cutting is not necessarily innovative. You could be smart about it, you could be as smart and as clever as you want to be, but it's not an innovation to say, well, we're just going to forcibly spend less. And some of the things that don't get money, we have to question, maybe they should have had a higher priority than other things. So now we are where we are. And ironically, one of the reasons why I and others, but I will just speak for myself on this, my name, I won't attribute other names to this. I don't limit to the politicians, because the politicians are campaigning on certain things. Stand your ground laws. How are we going to get all of you guns? I have no idea. Let's remove the 3 ships. Will that help you pay your grocery bill next month? Not really, no. At least not in the short term. Those benefits maybe will be the long term if other things happen around it. Those are intangibles, but we have tangible needs right now. Look at what's being campaigned on. Look at the promises that are being made, and ask yourself, really and truly, how are these things going to make a difference? Where's the innovation? Where's the new ideas? How many of these are the same old ideas that have already gotten us in this situation? Why do we expect to get out of it now with the same song and dance? People want to cry, why you say that all politicians are the same, and why you want to say that they all do the same things? Well, because the proof is in the pudding of what they publish for themselves. It's not that I want to just paint them all with a broad brush, but the results speak for themselves, or, to be more accurate, the lack of results. Politics is a messy subject, and you need to be willing to be tuned in, to be aware, before you could properly say, this is what I truly need. Because we don't seem to have leaders that will tell us what we need to hear. They're more than happy to tell us what we want to hear so that you will vote them in. And never truly understand exactly where your part of the error lies. I think that's presumptuous. You could call in later and have at it after the break, but we need to go to the daily review right now. So, of course, I've mentioned this before, and it may seem repetitive, but the minister has been on a radio interview recently where she basically hit the country with some harsh reality. And I'm not necessarily going to blame her because I don't think she has much control over the circumstances of what she revealed to us. And this is what I've been saying, actually, as much as I have leveled criticisms at her, and I will be leveling criticisms at her in a couple of minutes, I have been saying before, budget, it's out of her control. A lot of the issues stem from budget. I would hazard, I guess, at least for a year, if not 2 years. And more or less, maybe you don't want to believe her, but this tracks with everything we've seen, which is why I am more than willing to believe her on some of the things that she said publicly recently. And that is basically, there is not enough money to fix all schools, because when you look at the billions of dollars that is going to the Ministry of Education, a lot of it is essentially already pegged for recurrent expenditure. We're talking money that has to go to the tertiary institutions. I want to get, $1 billion here and $1 billion there. I want to get it. Okay, $1.5 billion to UE COSTAT, UTT, NESC, YTEP, right? So she says, I thought education had a higher allocation than this, but she said from $5 billion it goes down to 3.5. So that's what she said. I thought education had 6 to 7 billion, but she says it's a $5 billion allocation, it goes to 3.5. Forgive me, I haven't double-checked that in a rush. Now then, she's going to, the staff of the Ministry of Education itself is another $1 billion. This one somewhat shocked me. The staff of the Ministry of Education's salary, not including teachers, is $1 billion. I did not expect the non-teacher salaries to be that high, but maybe that was naive of me, right? Because salaries tend to be a significant chunk of any institution or organization's expenditure. So, right now we're down to 2.5 billion. 800 million for scholarships. Sorry, I think the staff's education is 800 million. The teacher's salary, the staff salary is 800 million. The teacher's salary is 1 billion. Then scholarships is another 200 million. So that's another 2 billion. So there's 1.5 billion left. Not entirely sure exactly about the rest of our math on the. But I assume when you basically get all the recurrent expenditure out, she's come down to a number of 150 million per year to deal with school repair. Now, she did say that what was available for this period is 20 million. What's needed is 190 million. So apparently there's even more expenditure going on to suck out that 150 million. There will also be recurrent maintenance and repair expenditures that will probably have to happen throughout the school term, right? And then, of course, wanting to build new schools, that's going to take some money as well, etc., etc., etc. Long and short is, she's claiming there is just not enough money for the required school repair. It is simply not available. And that has been the situation for some time. And at the end of the day, the question now is not to judge the minister and her ministry on, well, why they don't do repairs. Now we have a very practical and a very hard, unavoidable reason why that takes place. Now the question is, do we have enough transparency, enough analysis from experts in the various fields that are pertinent, enough of a breakdown so that we could accurately look at the situation and then assess, is the minister doing enough given the circumstances? Part of the problem is, because there's a lack of transparency, it may hide certain details that could lead the public to perceive that to be a no. Whether or not that's a fair assessment or not is besides the point. You don't reveal, what goes on into making the sausages, so that people don't have a perception of, oh gosh, what's in a sausage? All of the odds and ends and the snout and the nose and the this and the that and sausage, I don't want to eat it. At the end of the day, it's safe for human consumption. But the perception for some are, I don't want to touch sausages anymore because of what's used to make them. What's behind the curtain. So I get that. That's the temptation for a lot of authorities, businesses. They don't want people to know the reality because the reality could be perceived in a negative way, whether or not it actually is negative. The problem is a lack of transparency makes it extremely difficult for us to trust that this is all there is to it and there is nothing else that could be done. Hence why my opening monologue. Lack of money is no obstacle. Lack of an idea is an obstacle. So now, granted, and some people might say this is not fair. Well, this is why being in the pole position, being in the top spot, one, should demand the big bucks, relatively speaking, and two, it's demanding because these are the levels of challenges you're going to face. There is a fine line between saying it's impossible to deal with this situation and, well, we have to figure something out to improve it no matter what. Because we're talking about essentially the future of the country in this case, because it's education. We're talking about a situation that should be too big to fail, as opposed to what I fear it is. I pointed yesterday that it's too big to succeed. And at the end of the day, it's not about being fair to the person and giving them a chance. It's similar to the position of Commissioner of Police. And what I'm referencing now is not the minister in the position as minister, but rather the government in the position of government, because they control the budget, they control the agenda, they're supposed to have the vision, they're supposed to say what the mission is, they're supposed to execute it. And how could you do so when education is in this no man's land of slow depreciation? Because the minister points out, a lot of our schools are old, they need ongoing work, so that's, of course, sucking up a lot of that money already. But it's only going to get worse as they get older, and it's not as though we could replace them as they come up, as they need to be replaced, if maintenance doesn't happen. Because the reason why we can't do the maintenance is limited funds, so then how are we going to replace the ones that are completely broken down? In fact, Mount Old Secondary, that's basically one of the things that's come out there. So it's not just about the minister, it's about the whole package. Which political party is ready to try to deal with the situation? I would hazard a guess that I don't know if any of them are. This is a Kobayashi Maru. This is a no-win scenario. There are no easy answers here. And that's why it's very demanding. If this was a major conglomerate, an international corporation, what will happen is a CEO that cannot figure out a way forward will be removed and a new one will come in its place until you find someone who figures it out. Or your corporation will die. But the thing is, we cannot afford the corporation known as the country of Trinidad and Tobago to die. But that can happen if we let it. So the question is, and it comes back to you, the people, because we are supposed to be in a democracy. In a democracy, we are not ruled by a dictator for life, who will dictate terms of when we could speak, how we could speak, what we could speak about, when we could protest. When we could protest. In theory, that's not supposed to happen. And for the most part, it shouldn't. And it doesn't. COVID notwithstanding. Conveniently so, in some cases. But what's the point of being in a relatively free society if we muzzle ourselves, if we withhold our participation, if we silence our own voices and do not exercise not just our right to vote, which a lot of voters do not do, but also exercise your right to participate in the public discourse so that ideas can be presented and challenged and refined and then implemented. What we have is politicians rhetorically closing their eyes and throwing a dart at a wall, and whatever plan essentially that comes up, that's what it seems like. That's what the results suggest. What do we want for the future? We get what we ask for. We get what we pay for. The payment in this case is literally public funds, and we allow it to be paid because we don't demand more or better. All right, short daily review. Good lady is here. Let's take a break. Back at constitutional reform, because this is one of those topics where, honestly speaking, if we really needed everybody to weigh in, because once this exercise, if it goes forward, it's not going to be easily rectified or changed back. Long-term implications are quite serious. We'll be talking about that, continuing that discussion next. Stay tuned.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity, from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital.
How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm nothing to do with that.
I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement. If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break a balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put
Why
forever.
you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of
not no.
Let's go to the last part.
We are tackling the hard-hitting topics, some controversial topics, some topics we sweep under the rug. You don't always have to forgive in a relationship for it to move forward.
If it is you are in a situation where you forgive the person, but to the detriment of yourself, what are you really doing?
It is very uncommon for somebody in the younger age group to have dementia.
Atheists don't not believe.
Is that I can't disprove God, but you also can't prove God, so we kind of have to stalemate.
We'll focus on the woman who's being the victim, or the man who's being the victim. We exclude the children.
Folks are trying to study the underlying brain mechanism to figure out how does this particular disorder happen in the brain? How is the brain processing this?
Don't worry about AI, worry about humans working with AI.
Are you willing to learn new skills to stay relevant for the future job market? That's the challenge that people are going to struggle with.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
Nah, you don't need to register nothing. You don't need, we can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
We believe in different criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploited the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
Welcome to Talk About. All right, we have a lot to get through, not enough time to get through it, so we'll go straight at it. I am joined by the good lady herself, former Minister of Finance, attorney at law, legal scholar, Karen Shishera. And Karen, before we get started with the actual planned topic, something recently happened. Now, one of the callers called in to say, well, Mr. Dupre, may you rest in peace, he has passed away, and maybe now is the time that we could finally get the report on, the Commissioner of report on what happened with Clico. My whole thing was, he was not the only person, or his interest is not the only reason that was holding all of that up. There's more to this than just that, than this one man. What are your comments on the whole matter now?
The reason I really want, I'm glad that we're bringing it up because, as you know, I was the Minister of Finance and I have carried as an albatross around my neck anyhow because every time, no matter what they report on in relation to me, no matter what it is, they bring up how I took out my money out of Clico Investment Bank as if that caused, well, I think maybe fiduciary duty, etc., etc. Probably that's what they're trying to see. So at this point in time, on his passing, different reporters from different news outlets, media, which I respect, I made a point of saying, and this is why I wanted to bring it up. I said, I do not take away the fact that he had many people of color, not only in Trinidad, but in the region, because I saw it for myself, I saw it happen, so I do not take that away from him. I do not take away the fact that he was truly a visionary and entrepreneur. But what I did say, and I said, please, if you're going to report what I'm saying, do not report it unless you say what I also said, that what he was a terrible man. He was a terrible man because he used Clico Investment Bank as his personal bank. He developed this product, which I have told many people, I don't know how many times I've said it. I never owned it, neither did any member of my family. When I say that, my husband, my children own it. But use that as a family-owned business to finance his huge projects that he had in his mind. Whether it was because of his sense of grandeur, whether it was a sense of greed, but he surrounded himself with people who were motivated by greed and a lust for greed and a lust for power. And I said that you cannot, at the same time, have people lauding him. And all of this said, when he put us and put this country in the position it did. It is he that did that. And I saw Salvin Kojo talking about the central bank, as if the central bank could have made that decision without the Ministry of the government and the Minister of Finance. So I mentioned that, and then saying that they knew some things were wrong. Right. So what I want to say to the national community, and don't spend any more time on it, is whilst I admire a lot of what people said about him, I said, please do not report me unless you report that I said that he was a terrible man, and the reason why Clico found itself in the position it wasn't just the global financial crisis, methanol prices crashing, which they own the largest methanol company in the world, his investments in Florida all over the world, in all kinds of investments abroad, they call it excessive related transactions, meaning he was using his different companies, CIB for example, to get cash to carry on with his own family empire that he was building. High interest rates in order to attract the money. Some people said it was just like a Ponzi scheme that allowed him to get the money, get his agents to get the money. What?
Interest rate payouts.
Yes, but you see, and the point about it is that money should have been kept in a statutory fund by the Insurance Act because it is not for cars, it is people's pension. And he took it and he couldn't, and he knew when he went to the central bank, not me, when he went to the central bank, he read Selvin Kajol, like he knew a lot, more than I knew. When, so I would like him to say that, to reflect on that. They knew that something was wrong. Clearly something was awry with this company. The product that he was offering and agents were selling, my husband was dead by that time, by the way, and I was teaching at the law school, by the way, that he was using that to get the money to finance all of his big, huge projects. And he did that. He also acquired a lot of debt. The debt was the statutory fund. The debt was the CIB people's monies that they had. That could never be, nobody could laud that, nobody could applaud that, nobody could say that is right. So all of those people who sit down there and want now today to put him on a thing, I don't take away the good he did, but do not forget, he did a lot of wrong, and he was surrounded by people who was as greedy and power thirsty, and he did it because of, we can't go into all the facts, but I said it and I'm putting it on record. I felt very strongly about it. And today is not the day for that discussion. I tried to get it on this show. For some reason, they decided to cancel my, what I said, but I could have backed it up with documents. But needless to say, I wanted to be understood that what he did was absolutely wrong. It was wrong to the country. It was wrong to the investors. And he did it, and people he surrounded himself, and that is why they do not want to release that commission of inquiry. And you have to wonder now why they don't want to release it. Because I know why they don't want to release it. And then I read in Andrew Bagu, not me, I didn't say it. Andrew Bagu said it in the article. He said at the same time, whilst all this was going on, the then Attorney General was removed because of conflict of interest. And John Jerry, that is what Andrew Bagu's report said, because of conflict of interest of your speaker, right? So why don't you put a spotlight on the central bank? Why don't you put a spotlight on CIB? Why don't you put a spotlight on those people and take it off of me? And if I have the power, I'm telling you this, if I have the power, not only would that report be released, because as long as they will release it, they could keep that cloud over me. But not only would I release it, but I would have another forensic audit as to how 5 billion turned 100 and something billion, and ended up with the government owning nearly everything that that company had, and crushed it, destroyed it, and made sure that the former central bank governor said it. He said, this is what he said, I didn't say it, he said it. He said, when his first meeting with Ms. Imbut, the only thing Ms. Imbut said is he wants Kliko's assets. That's what he said. I did not say it. He said it. So they could go back, and he said, all I want, and after that he walked out of the room, according to the report. So stop blaming Karen Shearer. Stop romanticizing Mr. Dupree. He is what he is, and I'm on record as saying what I think of him. So those newspapers who did not say that, I'm saying it to you now.
And I'll just point to the fact that with other situations, particularly abroad, we look at them with a lot of skepticism on the outcome. And yet, to some degree, I do wonder if we're too accepting on this one. With that said,
let's get to the topic.
Let's get to the topic. Because
constitutional reform.
Constitutional reform. And we're finally reaching the point where I think, when I have spoken about constitutional reform in the past, this is the one that I think is, at least in my opinion,
and I agree
very important. If we don't at least try to make headway on this, I think it will be, a shame.
Yes.
Right? So I'll let you go ahead.
Okay. And I absolutely agree with what Shona said. And I had another program. I had Dr. You don't mind me saying?
Yes.
Dr. Vaness James, who, of course, was even shed more light. And he basically, I don't necessarily, what he said, which I think was a very good point, and this is the point that we're coming to, which is the first past the post system, if we should continue that electoral system of government in our national election modem, is first past the post, or should we have proportional representation, or a variation of that? And the reason that, and that was brought up in the Wooding Committee, but what he has said, and I see the value in what he says, even though this Constitutional Reform Committee did recommend or did consider that they should increase the number of non-elected MPs, so that they don't, non-elected MPs or non-MPs in the parliament, so that you get not only the opposition's voice and the government's voice, but you get truly a representation of the voice of the people, because that puts tremendous, as it does in England, and that is what I've read reports on, it does in England. So for example, in England, the current government has 405 members of parliament that are Labour MPs. Of the 405 Labour MPs, only 18 of them are cabinet ministers. And that is why you can speak about separation of power in England, because the Prime Minister and his cabinet are out, I mean, with 405 MPs who do not necessarily agree with cabinet decisions, do not necessarily agree with a number of things. They have the ability to really separate legislative and the executives, because the executive is limited in numbers, and the parliament is enlarged in numbers and can put tremendous pressure and have these things on televised, and people can see the argument, and they cannot use the fact that they are, when you look at an election, if they win, let's say they win by a bare minority of, say, 21 seats, other 21 seats, nearly every single MP who will be in the legislature would be made cabinet ministers or ministers in a ministry.
Yeah.
So you do not have in our system true separation of power. So when we took the Westminster model, we, since voting, and today I'm saying that the recommendation is that we all agree that the first past the post leaves out a lot of persons, wasted votes, many people, because what it says is once you reach the 50%, all the other votes don't matter. So if you got 49% of the voters who did not agree, did not want this government to form the government, they have no voice in the parliament.
Well, and to be specific, we could have 49% of the voters voting for the opposition, but if all of the seats, it's 49% for the other party, well, it will look as though the government won by a landslide, even though it's 40. They only got 51%
and they gave
of the
you,
votes.
and I don't think I said it on this show, but I went to, I think dealing with the same point. They said it's the same report, this constitutional reform report, said that in the 9 general elections, I think I made that point, between 1991 and 2020, it's 6 in which the PNM won, they got less than 50% of the votes. And they said in 1981, for example, ONR got 22% of the votes but did not win a seat.
Yeah.
In 1980. So they're showing you that the first party the system, you talk about the preamble and all of that, it is not representative. Almost half of the country, and sometimes more than half of the country, are left out. And then when you have an executive, legislative system that we have, that all the members of the legislature that form the government are members of the executive because they are cabinet ministers, then you really cannot say that we truly have a democratic republic. So one of the recommendations that has been made, there are many recommendations, one of them is called the party list system. So what you will do is recognize that there are 41 seats. They recognize that whichever government, whichever party wins the most out of those party seats, constituency seats, will form the government. And they are the government because they were elected by the people. So there will not be any question about that. But to ensure the balance, to ensure proper representation, to ensure that we really have that separation of power so that there's not that level of executive overreach. They have what they call the party list system, which I think they use in municipal corporations for elections of aldermen and for councillors. And one of the recommendations is that each party would drop a list in alphabetical order, not in preference of who they want.
Right.
And when you go to vote, you have the vote for the elected MPs, and then you have what the list vote, which is the other, and it cannot be equal because, as Dr. James pointed out to me, in order to get the legislature to operate truly independent, it cannot be, as being suggested in this report, that, this is what he said, but I have not gone into the detail.
Yeah.
It cannot be just double the numbers. It has to be more than double the numbers. You have the list, and persons will be able to vote in their preference, alphabetical order, so you're not showing any preference.
Bias, yes.
Right? And those persons will then form part of the parliament and have a voice in the parliament, and as well as NGOs. And he said in his Tobago, he's very strong on it. He said they work really much on this idea of village communities, and he says, if you really want a government that is really a separation of power and also ensure that there's real representation of the people, we should also have elected senators, not just appointed senators. Okay. So there are a whole number of variations, but what it comes down to is the first past the post, it cannot work. Secondly, we have to find a variation. One of them is the list system. And thirdly, it cannot be twice as much, even though they can't vote, but they have a voice. And they must have a voice.
When they say twice as much as many...
as the elected members.
So to say, you're not just doubling parliament,
right,
or you're not having twice as many MPs in the government side versus ministers.
Right.
You want to have a significant...
Much larger. Right. And also, too, as they do in England, that is why they can talk about separation of powers, because they limit the number of cabinet ministers.
Now, my only concern is, ironically, the number of people needed for that system to work will be significantly larger, whereas I might just prefer to say, why is cabinet members of parliament in the first place? I understand that's the system that we got from Britain, but you can branch them off and just let the prime minister. We elect the prime minister directly. We vote for the prime minister. He picks his cabinet.
Yeah, but you see what they do in England. This is the other point, which is why I started off with that. It's not just a question of doubling the numbers and all of that. The reason it can work in England is because they limit the number of cabinet ministers you can have.
That's true.
Right?
So if you have more than 18, or no?
They in England, I went and counted it.
Yeah.
They have 405 Labour members of parliament in their parliament. They have 600 and something members of parliament because they have 605 constituencies. So if only 18 of the members of parliament that who form the government can be members of the cabinet, and there are 405 MPs in that party, you can understand the kind of oversight and surveillance and pressure they can put to bear on the cabinet in a really effective way, not only because they have the numbers we don't have. So when I talk about the system, it's not only changing the system from first past the post, which is one thing, but it's also changing the actual structure of the parliament in such a way that you have sufficient voices in the parliament who can balance off the power of the executive in the same way that they do in England, because they deliberately limit it to 18.
Yeah, and we have something like 23 ministries.
Right, and he said you cannot have, and that is...
of course, not everybody is an MP, but when you get down to it, when you look at the government side of the bench, between ministers and a ministry, it's quicker to count how many are not members of
that
cabinet.
is why the other recommendation was not only with the MPs, but it's saying with senators. Some of them should be appointed, but some should be elected. You see, so all towards achieving, as much as we can, a true representation of the people, people's will, so that as half of the country is not left out, but also allowing enough voices to be part of what they want to see for the country, and putting the kind of pressure, if you want to say, and ensuring that separation, which England can do because by sheer numbers and limiting the number of cabinet ministers.
Well, will this mean that we may have to break the constituencies down to even smaller pieces? Because like in America, Congress does not have just one representative for New York City. I believe there's multiple, right? At least two. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez does not represent that entire area in Congress, right?
No.
And to some extent, because I understand, one of the reasons why I prefer to get the executive out of the legislature completely is the fact that there are a lot of questions other people don't feel currently that their MPs are representing them. Now, granted, it's even, you could even say that in some cases on the opposition, who none of them are ministers, so that's not the only issue, you know. That is not going to solve all the problems. And maybe if we're going to have all these MPs anyway, I assume they will each have to represent some smaller part of the country.
It's not only MPs, they talk about NGOs, they talk about different representatives. The idea is it hasn't been fleshed out, and I certainly have not fleshed it out, but the issue is that even from the voting committee, they understood that taking the Westminster model and just transferring it to us, and seeing this idea of separation of power between executive, legislative, and judiciary is really it's not real, because of the fact of the number of MPs in the House, and also the limitation of the number of cabinet ministers that can come out from the MPs of your party. So,
did they specify how NGOs would be selected?
No, we didn't go into all of that. What he was,
this is his recommendation.
Yeah, but and as a general recommendation, I think has to be fleshed out. I think what he was trying to say, and I think there's value in it. He says, you know, looking at all the other things really doesn't matter, because until you achieve a separation of power between the legislative and executive, all those things about fixed term, this thing, all of that is who can sit on in commission, what this, what that. Really doesn't matter when no one else has a voice if every decision to pass the law and enforce the law are made by the very same persons.
And I do believe one of the takeaways, at least by the press from the report, is it seemed as though, and maybe from the report itself, right? I haven't necessarily looked for this specifically in the report. There was a sentiment that people wanted power to be more spread out, to be less concentrated. And right now, when you get down to it, the government, legislative, is essentially cabinet.
Exactly.
And to say that we don't have separation of powers is as basic and as direct as it could be. It is almost impossible to have any less of a separation of powers than we could possibly have.
I took this from it. They said it in the report, saying it what people said. They said they wanted more effective government. They wanted a more powerful demand for a more democratic society where citizens have more say and more control. They wanted expanded rights to an environment, economic and social and cultural rights. They wanted more building and fostering a political consensus. So the long and short of all of this is that the model we have does not allow for that. And what they have recommended, according to Dr. James, whilst it is a move in some area, it really makes no difference if the separation of powers really is not controlled by limiting the number of MPs that can be cabinet ministers, and also by increasing, having either unicameral or General Assembly, one house, and having among them, as one suggestion was made, having some of the senators not just be appointed or nominated, but also be elected by the people.
Now, if we move away from first past the post, and one of the things that I think it's not necessary, well, you could argue this also applies to America, but you don't see this in Europe. What you see in Europe is you see multiple political parties.
Yes.
What we see in Trinidad and Tobago and in America, nationally, 2 political parties. Because if it's past the post, I think it doesn't leave a lot of room. When the COP first came onto the scene, they got a significant amount of votes, like 100,000, I think, votes in that election, but they got no seats. Any new force that's trying to fight for change has such a long road. I guess you could say it's going to be at least 2 elections on average, history says. With the way how the current things are, we don't know if history will hold true to that trend, right? But my point is, one of the things, yes, there might be some negatives involved. When you have like 6 political parties making a parliament, things could get bogged down. But the flip side is, when you have more entities coming out, you can't just sit comfortable, oh, well, you know, I'm the PNM of the UNC, and I'm either going to be in government or opposition. I'm still going to get a salary either way. I'm still going to get a pension either way. I don't have to be that good. I just have to.
I think they want the will of the people to be heard.
Yeah.
They want the will of the people to be heard. And, you know, Rome was not built in a day. And where we are, where you see where Europe is now, that didn't happen overnight. You have to remember they have gone through many iterations of electoral systems, and they have a queen that's just a ceremonial head and all, or king, sorry, at this point in time.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
It's been so
God
long.
save the king, God save the king. But what I'm trying to say is we must understand it's only 62 years. And the fact that we're having this discussion is a very good thing. And we may not be there, or certainly me, I would not be there to see the change. But the fact that you start, walking a mile starts with the first step. So what we're doing are making the first steps. And what we're doing is hopefully making people more aware of the options that they could exercise. And persons who are more experienced in this, and economists and different people. Also, the point was made that the people it was made is that even the composition of the constitutional reform was seen like the executive had picked. No, there was right, and were you really serious about this thing? So that was another thing.
Shouldn't that also be, if I was in government?
But they're not serious.
I know. One of the things that I would be concerned about is, I understand the current system. It's not as though there's a lot of ways to allow for the independent selections of things. When you select the president will never be seen as 100% independent of the government. right? So I get that. One of the things that I would have hoped...
But you can't do that now. One of the recommendations is
exactly.
direct. Either you can do it two ways. Either you let the people vote directly for who they want to spread, like they do in America. I mean, we have variations of the American thing, but you can marry
Mix and
things.
match, yes.
We can marry things and create something at the end of the day with the Electoral College. And people vote separately for their president. And the Congress and the Senate can, because of the way it is structured, you may have a president who is a Democrat, but the House or the Senate is controlled by the Republican. So there are lots of checks and balances within their system. I'm not saying we adopt their system, I'm saying we look at everybody else's system, know our system is not achieving its objective, and know that the first party post definitely cannot continue if we want to achieve what we want to achieve for this country as a democratic republic. And we have to go past the first party system and look at other alternatives, of which there are many available in, and have come out in Europe, which I'm sure is within the last 30, 40 years. We're only 62 years old.
Now, herein
I want
lies...
to go to the saving clause point too.
Okay.
Do you want me to do that?
All right. You can go ahead with that. I'll say
it very, very quickly, right? The saving clause provision is really... When we became, and Wooding said it and said it at the time, saving clause provision, which was in our independence constitution and carried over into our republic constitution, effectively says that if there were laws in place prior to us becoming independent, that those laws, even though they infringe your section 4, your freedom, or all those freedoms that you're supposed to enjoy. And by the way, this Constitutional Reform Committee expanded the rights to privacy, rights to health and education, rights to sanitation, but all that is good talk, right? All that is good talk, okay, that's very nice. But the point about it is, he said there was a need for that because we needed certainty. We didn't have judicial jurisprudence or any sort of history so that it was necessary at the time. But definitely, both Wooding and this Constitutional Committee agree that the savings clause should be done away with. And where the emphasis should be placed on is you get rid of it and you rely on Section 13. And Section 13 is the one that says that even if a law gets the 2/3 majority required, if it's a special majority law, like the Bail Act, that's a Keeley-Charles case. Even if you get the special majority that is required to make that law, it still would not be considered to be, unless it comes up to the Section 13 requirement. And the Section 13 requirement is spelled out in a very general term that that law is consistent with a country that has a recognition of the rights and rights and the fundamental rights and freedoms of the individual. So what they have said is it is no longer necessary. Some jurisdictions have already got rid of it. Barbados, Dominica, Belize, Guyana, they've all got rid of it. But what they're saying is the Section 13 become even more important, and they need to rewrite and make it a much more robust provision, because in the Keeley-Charles case, where the Court of Appeal, the Privy Council agreed with the Court of Appeal that the bail legislation was not saved law, meaning that it was law that we inherited because of this existing law provision, savings law provision, they nevertheless found that the Attorney General did not do a convincing job of showing that the law should stand because it did not pass the test of proportionality, meaning that you have to weigh the rights of the individual with the rights of society. And therefore, what they have recommended, like many countries, get rid of the savings clause provision, which is the reason why we have the death penalty provision on our books. Get rid of the savings clause provision and take the Section 13 provision and increase its robustness and increase its requirements, so that even if you get a law passed through a 2/3 special majority, it's still subject to challenge by a newly recrafted Section 13. And that's a big change. I wouldn't deal with those two because there's so much, but I think those two are the big ones. The saving clause and Section 13 would become now a much stronger provision, and that is the test you would use. and that is what the Privy Council applied in Achille Charles' case, and said that the Attorney General, not only did they agree with the Court of Appeal that the bail provisions were not existing, were not saved laws, but it said nevertheless the Attorney General had failed to show that the Section 13 provision had been satisfied, that the allowing that law was proportional. He said no, it was not proportional. He did not do a sufficient persuasion that it was proportional, so they're saying put some more effort into that. So those are the two main things.
So just so I'm clear, so the idea is we get rid of the saving clause and we put new legislation to deal with death penalty, murder cases, that sort of thing.
No, but then you can pass laws.
Then you can pass, right.
You can pass the laws, but then what they're saying, the Section 13, which is there, is there. But what they're saying is that the Section 13, which says that even if you get the 2/3 majority, which they did get for the Bail Act.
Right,
They did get it.
Right.
They are saying, Achille Charles says that is still, you cannot say that I cannot get bail for murder.
Okay.
Right? And the Attorney General's argument was, one of his main arguments was that apart from everything else, when they passed the Bail Act in the 1990s, right, it satisfied the Section 13 provision, which is in our legislation as we speak. And it was needed because of the runaway crime, because of all these things.
Back in the 90s.
Right. No, he argued it recently.
No, okay, it's needed.
He argued it, right. The law was passed in the 1990s.
Right.
So now he's saying, look, we have in the Act something called the Section 13 provision, and he's saying he understands that when they argued it in the 1990s, that obviously they had satisfied the Parliament that it was met the requirements of Section 13, that it was proportional, that it was something that should have been passed. And what the Privy Council has said, recently in the Achille Charles case, in relation to that point, that in Section 13, the AG did not convince them that it was proportional to take away the right from judges to grant bail, even if in very rare cases. So this Constitutional Reform Committee says, get rid of the savings clause, we don't need it anymore.
Right.
But we've got to take that Section 13 that has to be reframed, restructured to make it more robust so it can stand up to any challenge when someone says, well, you got the 2/3. Then they say, yeah, you got the 2/3, but the law not proportional.
You're right.
So they'll rest out the kinds of things you're going to have to look at to satisfy a court that the law is proportional.
As a non-lawyer, to put it in a very oversimplification, layman's terms, right? Sometimes even what is the law is not actually the law.
Yeah, and the thing about it, the law is not stagnant. You know? You have to understand that what happens as we go along, then we get new challenges. Achille Charles came up, and then you have to start looking.
Things.
Yes, and then you have to start looking at things and saying, wait, let's look at this.
Because when you notch open a door, there are further implications.
Right, and it's good, and it's good.
That I understand, and that's why I understand why some judges are not so gung-ho all the time to just go willy-nilly on what judgments they pass down.
Right, so I think we dealt with 2 points. The point was get rid of the saving clause, we all agree, but the Section 13, the proportionality test, is it, even if it passed the 2/3 requirement for special majority, that nevertheless the legislation needs to be reworked and restructured so that you are very clear what you need to meet in order to meet that proportionality test. And for the courts to say, yes, you have met it, and therefore the law is good law. And we dealt with the first point with first past the post.
The big one.
Right, and it has 2 implications. How do we do it? But we know we need to do it, and the benefits of doing it. And you cannot take the system in England, Westminster model, where only 80 out of 400 MPs are in the cabinet. There must be a reason for that.
So, and I want to take a break, but I just want to point out, the PNM essentially, and this is why they should have never done this convention, published it or broadcasted it. The party They rejected proportional representation. Apparently, they are going to reject potentially any change with regards to how elections occurs and potentially upsetting the apple cart of their math to win elections. Now, if that's not the case, maybe they should clarify that. But we leave that up to them. If they don't,
and
we just
the
have to run.
Constitutional Reform Committee failed to address that major issue.
Right? We leave it to them. If they don't, we could only go with what they said, and what they said doesn't go in line with at least what we think is important. That being said, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll actually open the phone lines. Stay tuned.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus, quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
All right, we're back. Karen, unfortunately, the earpiece has slipped out, but that's fine, that's fine.
I got it. No, have I? Anyway, go ahead, don't worry about it.
Oh, yes, no. We actually, if someone could come in, we actually do need to, so Karen can any calls, we'll sort that out. In the meantime, we're going to open up the phone lines.
Yes.
We want to hear from you, the viewer. I get it. Karen said a lot of things that are highly technical in a legal sense. If you need clarification, we'll try to clarify for you to some extent, and we were talking about this off air. To some extent, while commentators like myself, analysts and experts like Karen will try to simplify it, this is a topic where, to some degree, each individual citizen has a responsibility to themselves, to their families, to their neighbors, to do at least enough work so that they could try to understand all the important points for themselves. Listen to all of the analysts, listen to all of the commentary, try and understand for themselves, because this is that important. And with that said, we have our first caller for the morning. Arima, you're on the air. Good morning, caller. Caller, good morning.
Yeah, morning, sir. How are you going?
Well, I've had better months, I guess.
It's only 4 days in a month.
It's only 4 days in a month. I've had better months, technically. Still waiting on property taxes is right there. But caller, how about you?
Right. My topic this morning is what Ms. Tishara said this morning. It kind of, quote unquote, disappointed me because I am of the opinion that she's living in. If she continues saying the same thing over the years about what transpired with Clico and her involvement, and she started to tend to believe what she is saying, but she knows that the position she held, she should not have done that because she had information and paid the trust of the people of Trinidad and Tobago while she held that position.
Karen, let me. Caller, at the end of the day, all right, caller's left. At the end of the day, Karen has said multiple times she wants the report out. One would imagine that if there was any evidence of insider trading, the Commissioner of Inquiry report would have that. So the thing about it is, I understand that we all think we know. Now, to some degree, whether we like it or not, and I've said it, the standard is the standard, and it is innocent until proven guilty. We can't say affirmatively, 100% sure, no doubts about it, without at the very least some significant evidence, and not just, well, it looks bad.
Oh, and the only reason I brought it up, by the way, is because of Mr. Dupree's
death. And it was a topic that came up.
It was
right?
in the context of Mr. Dupree's death.
Because at the end of the day...
But as I understand, that's what I have to say.
The best source of evidence, and it might not be the final piece of evidence, is the Commissioner of Inquiry report. Whether you want to debate Karen's participation or not, that is not as useful as saying, why don't we just get the Commissioner of Inquiry report published? If it's missing things, then we could go from there, right? But Karen's not afraid of it being published, and that alone is enough for me to be content saying,
and she's not afraid to speak out against the government, right, which I should go in a little corner and not say anything.
Right. If they had that date on her, it's very hard to think that it wouldn't have leaked by now. We have another caller on the line. Sorry, caller. Good morning. Good morning, caller.
Yes, good morning, sir.
Yes.
Your byline on the TV was a mid-morning midterm review, but you went off into other
midterm review.
Yes, that was. So I was expecting the midterm review. Anyway.
Oh, sorry, that was my mistake.
Yeah, I am calling to make a point with respect to the midterm review. No, and I want to speak specifically. I want to speak specifically about the way the recurrent and the development vote is managed in the Ministry of Finance. And we have been promised ever since I was a little boy that we were going to, I'm 76 years old, that we were going to get reform of the way we do business. It is no wonder that schools and whatever say they don't have enough money. We have the money, but we do not manage the money properly. You can search high and low in the recurrent vote, and you will never see money allocated towards repairing Mount Hope School, wherever school
Secondary
it is,
school,
or Chacon. You will never see that. All you will see in the recurrent vote is the amount of money they give for material, small equipment repair, this, that, and the other, a whole set of things. And when the thing called, and Ms. Nunes might be aware of it, when the thing called management by objectives was the thing to do, we say we're going to reform this way of doing business. This big, long, old-time vote book, and book the recurrent vote. Now, we have the thing called the development vote, which is our next dynamic, but I'm talking about the recurrent vote and the way we manage this recurrent vote. And as a minister, Ms. Nunes will be familiar with the way we do things. It's like you don't know what you're doing, right? Money being there, but you can't spend the money how you want to spend it, Or as a public servant, you'll find yourself in some serious difficulty. So I'm hoping one day Ms. Nunes and whoever else you could get will address this need for reform of the way we do our accounting. Mm-hmm. And we have this piece of legislation. I can't remember the name that governs all of this. Since independence, but you still have the three ships on it.
Which legislation, caller?
The one that deals with the way in which we manage the
yeah, and what he's talking about. He's already one that covers the Auditor General.
Yeah, Exchequer and Audit.
Exchequer and Audit Act.
The Exchequer Act, yeah.
Right.
Yes.
When I joined the public service, that was one. They gave me a copy of that, and they gave me a part copy of the public service regulation, and they said go home and study that. That was in the 1970s. I don't think they'll do that anymore. But all these things need reviewing and checking. You mean I still will die after 76 and still see vote book and invoice order book? Things have to change if we really want to be serious. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I just want to say two things to that. I really don't think they have the money, but they have priorities in which they want. And three, they like it like that because as long as you have a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of, and you don't simplify things, it's easier for things to not be as transparent, as accountable as it should be. So there is a reason, partly not deliberate in some cases, but partly it could be so that you have to wade through too much to try to get to the bottom of it. But I don't think the government does have the money, but I do agree that they have priorities.
Yeah, my apologies for the poor topic, the top line of the byline. That was my error. That's an old, because that's mid-year review. That's like way old, right? Because we really were hitting the same topic, so that line was not supposed to change from last week, but I should have double-checked it. That's ultimately my fault. I agree with Karen. When you look at all of the areas where they don't have enough money to spend, they don't have enough money overall. But, caller, your point is still valid, because my point earlier was we still could criticize what they do with what they have. And what Karen said about the bureaucracy is 100% right. It's easier to hide inefficiencies, deficiencies, and other things like corruption, maybe.
No, absolutely.
If you make it difficult, if you believe inefficient processes. San Fernando on the line. Good morning, caller, you're on the air.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
Good morning, Karen. You know, Karen, you know the spotlight always on you on a Wednesday.
Isn't that true?
Oh
So,
my gosh, once someone says Clico, you know, even if Karen got here, that spotlight, zoom in.
Isn't that true?
yeah, well, the spotlight always on a Wednesday. Let me say this, with respect to what the topic was, what is into the Constitution, and yesterday I had a conversation with Dr. James. You know, we have to ask ourselves what we're trying to achieve here, what we would like. I think what we have to, and I agree with him. We have this is the biggest issue in that reform that we have to deal with first. We're trying to truly separate the legislator from the executive, and this is how do we do this? A larger, what we're trying to do is have a larger representation of the people in the legislature, which I totally agree with. The problem is that is because of our size. You hit on it, Sean, when you said, when Karen talked about the British system and probably increasing the amount of members in the legislature. The issue is because of our size. We are not a large enough population. So the issue is how do we achieve this? I think one of the ways to achieve this is is having a third party and a fourth party in the legislature. The problem is how do we get there? Because we had one chance when you talked about with Mr. Dukaran, when they got 146,000 votes, if I'm not mistaken, Sean. And I didn't get a seat. And because of the thirst of Mr. Dukaran for power, he could not wait another election and go it alone again, because if he had done that, he would have gotten seats and there would have been a third party in this country. There would have been three parties in the parliament. And he allowed himself to be duped.
Was that Dukaran's thirst for power or other people's thirst for power?
Well, he was a leader.
Yeah, but he didn't seem to be an assertive, like, at my way, the highway leader.
Don't try to understand.
All right.
I totally agree, Karen. Don't try to understand.
Don't try to understand politics. Believe you me.
Okay.
So, and that is my issue there, where we should have
I agree with the point. The COP was wasted.
Yes, we have to increase. How do we increase the legislature size to be a true check and balance on the executive? And that needs a little more exploration, but it was a very good topic for us to kick off on. Now, one more thing I have to say, Karen, with respect to CL Financial and Clico. What bothered me in this whole issue, and this is not throwing shade on anybody or yourself. But what bothered me is I was a member of a pension committee, and we had our pension our trust was being managed by a particular bank in the country, and that was in the heyday of Clico, and money was interest and people making money, and And we asked the question, how come none of on our portfolio of investments, we had no money in any one of those institutions, in any CLICO or CL financial institution. And we were told by the executive of that bank, because CLICO is insolvent, and we are not going to put your money there. And so it bothered me after the fact to see that this thing happened with that company. And the bank, our bankers knew that, in our instance. But how come it was allowed to go on? And I say I think the population needs to know this, what happened, and that report, as you say, would tell us, would bring us a little closer to understanding why it happened, why the institutions that were supposed to be the checks and balances failed in this particular issue.
I just want to just to add to what you said on the first point. It's not only increasing the legislature, but reducing the number of cabinet ministers from the executive, which is how I think England does it. They don't only have a large number of the size of their country, obviously, but they also take into account. They have about 3
to 5 ministries less than we do.
Yes, and they don't have that member.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I thought you.
One more thing quickly before I go.
Yeah.
When Karen talked about Mr. Dupree earlier, I want to say one thing. In that inquiry, the former principal of UE, Mr. Tiwari, in his cross-examination on the stand, you know what he said? He asked him why he left the board, and he said because he found out that Mr. Dupree took a loan for $50 million and did not put up nothing for collateral, just the fact that he was Mr. Dupree, and he had to get a loan for $50 million, a personal loan. And that brings back to what Karen said. So Karen, listen to me. Don't study them, Nagil. Don't study them. Have a good day, Sean and Karen.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to tell you one thing. I'll tell you one thing I will tell you. And I appreciate what you said. I only brought it up because Ms. Dupree has died, and I thought my views on it was misrepresented, as though I was, only in praise of him, and that was not right. That was what I was really trying to address.
Right.
And secondly, sir, you wouldn't believe you would not like to know what I knew. And if you get to know what I knew, you would become a very, very, very cynical person. Take it from me.
I'll say this. I do think that none of the outside financial people knew exactly what was going on with CLICO, but they could see from the outside certain information, and they could do the math in their heads, and they could figure out the math wasn't mathing, which is why it now, when you look back at it in hindsight, it looks almost like a Ponzi scheme.
But
right?
the thing is, I guess it's with me, that's why you have a law, even just to see it, and I don't want to belabor it after today. The section 4 of our freedom of rights of expression, there's something called defamation. And to be constantly saying something about me that you put me in a position where I can't prove because you won't release the community inquiry. Why you won't? I know why you won't. You know why you won't. Some of them people sitting down right there right now would be in trouble. And the thing is, 100% know that. And the other thing too is, if I had done wrong, I would shut my mouth and stay quiet and beg, please, God, don't let them come after me. But for me to go after this government, how come they haven't been able to attack? Because they have nothing on me.
And that's the thing. What you could
and that's
question
the end
is
of me. That's the end of
the outside people, and they have to worry about defamation suits depending, right? If they kind of say, well, CLICO's insolvent. Well, they're not insolvent yet until it finally was. Meanwhile, the regulatory bodies should have been able to do similar maths, and at the very least should have started to ask questions maybe sooner.
And let's leave it alone.
And then now, the Commissioner Inquiry Report, maybe some of those people there might be questions over their heads. We don't know. Who is being protected?
I know.
Well, I don't know. Now, with that said, we have Shogunas on the line. Sorry, Shogunas, good morning. Caller, you on the air. Last caller for the morning. Run out of time. Morning, caller.
Good morning.
Morning.
Gentlemen.
Morning.
I'm glad to hear Karen this morning on the CLICO. Because everybody was watering down it. And even she have been soft on Dupree. The reason I don't think they going to release that report is there are a number of things that Dupree did that they have not properly investigated or their actions taken. One of them is one of our most iconic companies, Angostura. When he got a majority control there, he get the board to use Angostura vast reserves that they had to buy a very lucrative company. I think it was a Jamaican company named La Salle.
That's correct.
But instead of putting the lien on the loan on La Salle, he put it on another useless company. And in the end, Angostura lost the money. Angostura shareholders have been trying for years to get it, and they say the central bank was investigating it. So I was waiting on this report to see exactly what came up.
There's also the Bob Lindquist report, because when I was there, the governor was telling me how much shell companies they had set up.
This is Clico?
Yeah. Shell Financial. I saw it. I saw that there's shell companies masking as if they were doing business, but it was ready to take money, and that's a fact.
Yeah.
And the DPP has that report, because before we left office, the Bob Lindquist report was given to him, and the governor said that is what he used to go after Montai and Dupree in a civil suit by the central bank under its powers. That report.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Well, they also built out the home mortgage bank.
Yes.
But that's the same thing. But the last point, I heard Karen say this more than once, and I was taught differently as regards the doctrine of the separation of the powers. It was not a separation of the persons of people or individuals, but of the powers. That if you're in parliament, you have to make law or check law, right? If you're in the judiciary, you adjudicate on law. And if you're in the administrative section, the executive, well, then you enforce the law. Right? And for that reason, I don't see that our system is not in conformity with the doctrine of the separation of powers.
It's how we practice it. It's how we practice it.
I don't think we...
No.
It's how it's how it's practiced, Kola. We're not getting the results that way. The problem is, Professor, you look at
I
things...
agree with that.
I agree
with that.
Because you
could change it, but don't put it under the doctrine of separation of powers.
Right, but I think the problem is we do have to change it to try, and it could fail, to be honest.
I understand what he's saying. Don't put it under that heading, but that is what it will achieve.
We could fail to ensure that there's no way the system can be undermined, but we do have to try to change it because of where we've reached. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Thank you. He says you were too soft on Dupree. I was like, whoo.
Because you remember my husband did benefit. I mean, you can't be unfair.
Yes.
I can't be unfair.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is, I was a wife of a person in Clico, and my husband came from Nelson Street. He worked hard. And Mr. Dupree really did. When I'd go to the convention as a wife and teaching in law school, I wasn't even thinking of going into politics, right? I was just there as a wife. And my view of insurance agents changed, because I saw that he insisted that all his agents dress a certain way. He made sure they got certification, they got the qualifications. And he says, if you want people to do well, you've got to treat them well. So I saw that side, and I admired that side in him. But the other part, no question about it.
I'll say this. I don't think he's Bernie Madoff. We're not at that level where it's an outright Ponzi scheme. But my point is, well, I don't want to say that, right? Because Madoff took it to the next level, right? But I will say this. There were good attributes of Bernie Madoff with regards to being someone in the financial sector.
But for whose benefit?
The thing is, we only found out later on, well, with regards to Madoff, they wanted him to help write the regulations when he was the one breaking the regulations most brilliantly, right? But how he conducted, or at least the appearance and certain other aspects besides rule building, were not necessarily bad. With regards to Mr. Dupré, you could even say that, as you're saying, even further. There were a lot of good aspects to him, but at the end of the day,
was really wrong.
And even before I knew a lot of the technical details, I knew that how he was moving the money around, there are rules against that types of processes for a reason, and this is essentially the reason where what ended up happening.
We don't want to talk too much about that. About constitutional reform.
Although I will just say this, and one of the reasons why we need reform, again, the caller San Fernando had it right. How was it allowed to reach?
But do you know what happened? One of the first things I just mentioned,
this
said
is
that.
Last.
Yes. I now came in, so I didn't understand the CL financial.
Of course, because you're coming with a law background, not a financial background.
My husband died in 2004, and I came in at the end of 2007, so I had nothing to do with the company.
Yes.
But I remember the first thing the governor was telling me, that he wanted the Financial Institutions Act passed. I really didn't understand why it was important, but it was important because what it did is that he could not, because of the state of the law at the time, he could regulate and have control over the financial institution, but not the insurance. And it was family owned, so they were not on the stock exchange. So what he wanted to do was to limit intercompany transactions so that they could not borrow and things. So the point is, efforts were made through the Financial Institution Act, and the governor is on record as saying it is that FIA that was the beginning of the end of CLICO. And Karen Teixeira was the minister who brought that to Parliament.
Because the financial markets crashed in 2008 in part was because of how risk was being not properly managed, right? And you could argue it's how CLICO essentially managed their risk on their loans in various ways. It's a house of cards that fell apart. It wasn't one thing, it was multiple things.
But anyway, so we raised it for one reason, and that's the end of it.
Thank you, Karen, for joining me here. We got through a lot today at the end of the day. Went a little over time, as unfortunately we always do. But with that said, folks, thanks to all of the callers for calling in and giving us their contributions. Even caller, I understand you don't believe Karen. That is all well and good and you're right. But I will say this. Use that energy. The first step should be, let's try and get the report out.
Why don't
and
you
then
do
we
that?
can take it from there. Then we can take it from there, right? Now, with that said, make today a good day. As Mr. Shah would always say, remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. Stay safe out there. We will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN. The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing at wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference.
Fan Zone,
Your reliable, authentic supplier has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
We have this equilibrium that we really need to have. It's about having the economy and the social and the environment taken into account and find the equilibrium that is necessary, that we can do everything. You will not be able to take social measures or to do what you have to do on the environmental place, also for the climate, if you don't have an economy that functions and that gives you the means to do it. So this is very, very important. But I must also say that her main message, in my opinion, was about security, about the values we have to defend, about this freedom that we have today to defend. That was, she had begun with that, she has stopped with that, and the majority she had looked for all the time is this majority in the center with all the forces that are pro-democratic, that are pro-European, which want to really defend what we have to defend, this Europe as we want to live. And this is today the main, in my opinion, really the main problem that we have to